I am John Najarian. In a moment, Pete joins me to break down some of the craziness that went on in college football as well as pro, and of course, some stocks thrown in just for good measure. Welcome to the Rebel's Edge. Bang! It was a wild weekend for football, Pete.
Woo.
Oh my. Oh my. I mean,
Yeah,
so many games.
I'll tell you what, when you kick it off with game day in the dark from Berkeley, California, and those students come out like I've never seen at any other school, John, I mean, that's a great way to get things started on a Saturday morning because it was dark out. These guys never went to bed. They were there. They were there at 12:30 the night before, and they were already going after it, and they stayed for game day. So they were pretty spent when it was all said and done. But I think of all the game days, that might have been the best one I've ever listened to, watched, and just marveled at all those students that were there in the dark at 5:30 in the morning. Wow.
Well, and Pete, did you see when Pat did the field goal thing with the kid?
Yeah.
For hurricane relief.
That was awesome. Pat was awesome. You know, I would have said the best one I've ever seen since they've started doing game day happened to be probably partially at least because of Pat. And it was about a year or 2 years ago, maybe out in Georgia. And it was just phenomenal. He had them singing and it was great. But this surpassed that. It was absolutely incredible. And, you know, he had the field goal kick by the kid, right? You know, with $500,000 plus another $100,000 and this, that, and the other. And it was just fun. And then the game lived up to everything they could have possibly wanted out of that game. That was incredible. And you and I will talk about that because this was a really weird weekend in college football.
I agree. Well, let's dive into the macro minute, Pete, because we don't waste all your time, folks, like some people on television might. Just yabbering about the thickness of the briefcase or the file that the Fed chairman carries into a meeting or whatever. So, Pete, what do you got for us as far as German factory orders and so forth?
Yeah, one of the worst declines we've seen in a long time, John, 5.8% month over month. It's the steepest since January. That was definitely a big negative, and I think part of the reason why we were looking at negative numbers when we came to this morning after Friday and all those great numbers. I'd also like to say one of the other things that I think should be there front and center would be we've got earnings kicking off, and that all starts again Friday with the financials. And of course, it's names like JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, New York Mellon, and we're going to get that, but that will kick off earnings season. So there's a lot to look forward to after we look at these German numbers.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, Pete, that while I agree with you, I really focused in on Goldman Sachs, because a former Goldman trader, that would be David Tepper, who might not be able to manage a football team worth a damn, but what he can do is trade. And 2 weeks ago, he said, China, I'm buying everything. Buy it, buy it, buy it. And I did. And it has gone straight up. And now Goldman Sachs, the firm he used to work for, has said, yeah, we're upgrading China now. I'm like, okay, it's a little late, but still might be more upside. Anyway, China ETFs are screaming higher as well as those stocks again today, Pete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing.
Now I'm going to throw one at you, fantastic futures. And I'm going to say, well, crude traded through 76 today, which means it's up $11 in just over a week.
Yeah. That
ain't good for airlines. That's not good for shippers. And it's certainly not good for consumers. And you could throw in Kamala Harris, Pete, probably ain't real good for her reelection chances either.
Yeah, that's a big run. It's been a massive run to the upside. We all know the backdrop of why and everything. The other thing that I would point out too, John, is mid-September, the 10-year was trading at a 362 mark, right? That's essentially where we were. Things were looking pretty good. You know what? Back to late July, levels now are over 4%. So we are really kind of moving to the upside. And when you look at where we were at 362 and where we are today at 4%, it doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of people. it's a big deal. And that's part of the reason why there's a lot of different elements about what's going on. You look at the 30-year mortgage, you look at all these different things. It is affecting more than just what people think. And it's going to be if it keeps going to the upside, which is exactly what it's doing.
Yeah, well, like you say, Pete, we've got the 10-year up over 4 now. We've got crude oil. It just broke 77 a few moments ago, Pete. So there's a lot of things moving in directions that if you're somebody sitting in that seat at the White House, you ain't real happy about how this is going in October for you.
Right.
All right, Pfizer, Pete, PFE. They got good news from a court. They invalidated 2 GlaxoSmithKline patents, but then they also got an activist, Starboard Value, who's basically acquired $1 billion stake in the company. Now, Pfizer is no little company, so $1 billion might sound like a lot to somebody, but when the company's worth 160 billion plus, Pete, I'm thinking, yeah, they can kind of posture, but they can't really force you to do much with a mere $1 billion, can they?
No, they're not going to be able to have that much influence. They're going to have to step it up if they want to, John. You know what's really interesting? I was taking a look at Pfizer because it's a name that really is from the past. When you look at it even now, it's pretty amazing because the yield is a pretty nice yield, right? 5.8%. That's not so bad, on a dividend yield. But the stock has done absolutely nothing year to date. It's almost completely flat year to date. And if you go back to 2021 in December, it's half of that level where it was close to 60, and here it is basically closer to $30. So you can kind of understand why there's interest from an activist and why they might want to shake it up, because the performance has not been there. And they're going to go back and they're going to talk to different former CEOs and try to get them on their bandwagon. I think they've already kind of recruited and done a little bit of that. But that is something that's going to be very interesting. And they're going to have to swing with a bigger bat, though, to your point, John. When you go in for $1 billion, that does sound like a lot. But when it's a company that's 160 or more $1 billion market cap, they probably are looking at these guys going, all right, if you want to have us step up, you better step up. And that could be something that maybe fuels a little bit of something for Pfizer going into the future.
Yeah, and indeed it might. Let's talk about air products, Pete. Things like helium and hydrogen. Yeah, that's what these guys do. APD. They are also seeing a big surge in their stock, Pete. And at least part of the reason, once again, is an activist investor. This time it's one called Mantle Ridge, and they've acquired $1 billion part of this company. And this company is only worth half of what Pfizer's worth, not even, basically a third, about $60 billion. Big company, but this makes more of a difference there than $1 billion does at Pfizer, right?
Absolutely. And it did hit 52-week highs today, John, based upon this news of getting us activist investor involved. And to your point, they got a bigger bat right now, given what APD looks like as far as what its market cap is. That all being said, 52-week, that's really nice. But what's really interesting is what the reaction is from many of the different houses that cover this, John. Evercore, upgrade. Citi, upgrade. Jefferies, upgrade. And by the way, when they put up what their price levels are, we're looking at 365, 345, and $364. So it's sitting right now about 312 or somewhere close to that. That's some of the levels that they've been at today. That still gives them plenty of runway to the upside. So it looks like the confirmation coming because of the fact that they've got this activist involved is certainly going to be very, very special. This is a name that potentially, I think, could really start to make a run as we get towards the latter part of this year.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Pete. A lot of interest in the stock, and certainly at $63 billion, as we already said, more significant of an investment here. Yeah. All right, Napa. This is one of the great names that a stock could have if indeed you're a premium wine purveyor, which they are. They're known as Duckhorn. And the Duckhorn portfolio has some of the best wines in Napa Valley, not the absolute, not Screaming Eagle, but, some really good premium wines. And apparently Butterfly Equity, Pete, wants to do an all-cash transaction at nearly twice the price that this stock was trading for just a bit ago. If you pull up, folks, NAPA, you'll see what we mean. The volume today is pretty outstanding. And the idea that that they stepped up in here was pretty interesting.
Yeah, Butterfly Equity. This is a big move, John, because of the fact that did they have to even go that high? Maybe, but obviously when you're looking at a stock that's probably trading closer to $4 or $5 and they give you an $11.10 bid, which correlates, by the way, to 1.95 billion, that's a pretty big number. And the volume, to your point, John, last I looked, it was over 32 million and still climbing. Its average is 1.2 million. So yeah, I would say that there's a lot of activity going after this one. It's very interesting. They had some issues of late. They've had some gross margin issues, but the one thing that they've done very well, their sales volume has been strong. It was up something like 20 some odd percent or whatever year over year. So there are some reasons why you can understand. And I think maybe it's going to take somebody like Butterfly to actually be able to squeeze some of the value out of this in a better way, whatever that might be, however they're going to approach it. But this is a really, really interesting big buy in the Napa Valley. You got to love, as you said, as far as stock symbols, this is one of the better ones for sure.
Well, and Pete, what do you make of this? So let's say they are going to be acquired. Let's say that Butterfly finishes this deal. Stock opened at 11 or $10.96. Am I rubbing my eyes and saying what's wrong with this picture, Pete? Do you see where it's trading right now? I mean,
something odd happened, John. I think there's some glitch somewhere, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I think that based on the bid and based on the company, and it looks like this is like it's not a done deal until it's a done deal, but it looks like it's damn close to being a done deal. When I looked at the last time I looked at the option markets, they made more sense than when I was looking at the stock because it seemed as if it was a lot closer to 11. Are you seeing kind of an odd pullback right now out of the stock itself?
Yes, I am. And
I don't think that's real.
I would say dismiss it, folks. That is not where the stock is trading right now. It is not back down at $5 a share after opening at 11 with this deal on the table and no other news. Let me just pull up one last news source, Pete, just to see NAPA. Let's see here. Barclays moved up to equal weight with a price target from 6 to 8. Yeah, good for them.
That's a great job.
Yeah, that's not what's driving the stock here, folks. All right, Pete, one more stock and then we'll dive into your sports.
Sure.
ALTM. This is Arcadium Lithium. And this one is rocking to the upside as well. The stock is up some 31% right now, Pete. The volume in here is also, as you might imagine, it's a $4 stock now. The volume's kind of sick. 58 million shares changing hands. Basically, Rio Tinto is expressing an interest in acquiring the lithium producer. And I know Rio Tinto is a stock, Pete, that you and I have talked a lot about, but they are just buying. And, for all the problems that lithium's had with EVs not being as popular this year as in prior years, nonetheless, lithium is something that people want. And obviously Rio Tinto knows that.
Yeah, it's considered a critical mineral, and it's obviously fast growing. We all know all of the EV space and lithium there and all of that. So I have no question at all about this one, John. I think Rio Tinto, they're obviously in talks. They got to get some things finalized. They're not even close to that part yet, but they did basically say, hey, look, yeah, no guarantees, but we are in talks. So I'm looking at this one and just figuring, you know what, if it's somewhere between 4 to 6 billion, which is a big wide range, I understand that, but that's what we're talking about here. It shows you. And I don't think this is going to be the last lithium name that we talk about in this way. I think those big boys that are out there are going to keep on gobbling them up. And it's not just going to be Rio Tinto. I think there are many others that are in that space that probably have the cash to be able to make these kind of moves. This is pretty damn interesting. The EV market, yeah, it's slowed down. But you know what? If you are looking into the future and everything in terms of sales, that's probably a direction that's got a much bigger vertical than a lot of people are wanting it to be right now, probably. And it isn't there now. but I think in the next few years, it's just up, up, up and away. So because of that, I think it's a great time for these guys to make some of these acquisitions. I don't think this is the first or the last. It's going to be very interesting to watch how this plays out.
It sure will. And I couldn't agree more. A lot of the lithium producers are going to get targets on them, and just leave it there. All right, Pete. Big weekend in sports, Saturday and Sunday sports. So in other words, college football and pro football. Which one do you want to kick it off with today?
Let's go with the college football, just because, there's something so special about college football, John, and game day. You and I already kicked that around. We don't have to go anymore. But how about the fact that maybe, just maybe, and if so, it's an interesting twist to this whole portal, NIL, and everything else, right, that we talk about. And it's interesting to me just to look at it and just talk about how the mighty are falling. And did they fall in a big way this weekend? And Cal had their opportunity. They had that game won, John, going into the fourth quarter against a Miami team with a Heisman pretty much quarterback sitting there throwing the football for him, who came from the Pac-12 actually back in the day. He was at Washington State. But John, what if I told you Bama was going to lose to Vanderbilt? What would you say? No way, probably. They never lose to Vanderbilt. So they lose. They're number one. Number 4 is Tennessee. They go out and all they do is lay an egg against Arkansas. And then Mizzou at number 9 gets a little bit cocky. They get beat up by a pretty damn good, well-coached Texas A&M team that's actually ranked number 25. But you can see where I'm going. Michigan, they're number 10. They collapsed against Washington. Number 17, USC. You know who they lost to? I think you do. University of Minnesota, baby. The Golden Gophers came through. The crowd came through. They rushed the field. PJ Fleck and everybody was excited beyond words. There was a lot of upsets this weekend, John. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. And you know what? To look at Florida State, who was number 10, and they've got NIL money. They've got all the things that they need to be successful. Everybody's got the portal, of course, but money is a big deal. Well, if I told you at the beginning of the year that a top 10 team, number 10, but a top 10 team was going to be 1-5 in the first 6, you'd go, I really doubt that. That's ridiculous. What if I told you this? Indiana is going to be 6-0 in the first FBS team that already has clinched eligibility for a bowl game. It's Indiana. Nobody else, because they've already played their 6 games, and they're 6-0. They've got a great quarterback. But you and I also talked about the kid out of Boise State. John, he is unstoppable. He's Barry Sanders, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years later. This is Barry Sanders. This guy, Gentry, is absolutely amazing. He deserves the Heisman practically right now for what he's put up. He's already had 1,000 yards. He's played 5 games. So I think at 11 yards a carry, this guy definitely is somebody that is really, really worthy of some accolades. And if somebody in the NFL is looking for a running back, this kid's going to be the guy. I mean, have you ever seen anything like this? Because I don't think we've ever had anything like this, John, with the top 17 teams. You've got loss.
Well, yeah, you're right. I know I have not seen a week as bad for ranked teams, Pete, as this. I mean, USC was either 9, 10, or 11, depending on the poll, and the Gophers took it to them. And could have beat Michigan last week. Should have beat Michigan last week. So, yeah, those Gophers, it looks like there's a lot of good Big Ten teams. And I'll tell you what, I don't think the Pac-12, the old Pac-12 teams, are happy about having to play in the Big Ten now, Pete, because with the exception of that Washington, and that's like a revenge game too. And it was played in Washington.
Right.
And I think, Pete, both I had that game, I believe, and you had the Cal game. You thought they might win outright, but shoot, they were getting what, 13, Pete?
Yeah.
And it was that close. So anybody that bet on either of those games probably a happy camper today.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, John, and I love the fact that Pat McAfee totally embraced Cal. They were in the dark. They had played, they had the night, the fraternities, and everybody had their parties or whatever. They showed up ready to roll. And it was one of the best game days ever, if not the best game day I've ever seen. And it was a lot of fun. And Pat McAfee got so caught up in it, he called Cal too. He goes, I'm going with the Golden Bears. So it was great. It was really a lot of fun. I got my Golden Bears on or whatever, and I should have my Golden Gophers too, but you can only wear one at a time. All right, how about the NFL, John? If today we were going to have to settle on who's the championship of the AFC and the NFC, here's what I got. I think you'd agree, because just eyeball test plus records, it's easy so far. It would be the Kansas City Chiefs for me against Baltimore. Baltimore's record's not great. They started off a little slow, and they finally figured out, hey, we gave a lot of money to a running back by the name of King Henry, and why aren't we running the ball with this guy? And I'll tell you, John, I looked this guy up. He is so committed to being the best running back in football. It's incredible. He's 6'3". He weighs 255 pounds. He's 2% body fat. He's got his own dietitian who lives with him. He does not put anything in his body that he feels is going to be negative. And when he gets the ball, nobody on the defensive side wants to see that guy coming at him. So I think Baltimore and Kansas City for me in the AFC, with Houston kind of looking in from the outside maybe. And then the Vikings, who so far remain undefeated. It's just them in Kansas City. And they just come in every week, John, with a quarterback that I did not believe in. And I first to admit it, so far I've been wrong so far. But he's played really, really well. And we've come up against everybody from San Francisco and now Green Bay, you name it. And we just keep on winning. Now we go out to the Jets. The Jets are just a team in disarray, by the way. So they're going to – the Vikings, I think, are one side of it. How about Washington? All they do is win. They've got the quarterback that you and I talked about last week. But the guy, John, I can't believe how Jaden Daniels – and we said it, the best quarterback in the draft was Jaden Daniels. Well, he's 77% in completions. He's not throwing a lot of touchdowns. He's also not throwing interceptions. So I'll take his stats there. He's averaging the ball 5 yards a carry. He's already run for 300 yards as a quarterback, and he's navigating the team to actually look like somebody who's relevant. We went into the season probably thinking, well, the Washington Commanders, or whatever name they want to call themselves, are probably going to be at the bottom. They ain't at the bottom, John. These guys are playing ball.
Sorry, Pete, I was muting you because of the drilling upstairs.
Yeah, no big deal.
Somebody's adding a bathroom or something. Yeah, I would say, Pete, that we're seeing some cream rise to the top in some cases. Some revenge play, like obviously the Vikings-Jets. That's fun. Just like the Michigan-Washington College game this week. And the Vikings are the only 5-0 team in the NFL. The only 5-0 team. Now, obviously, Kansas City's 4-0, and they could be 5-0 pretty quick, but that's pretty impressive. That Central Division, or as Chris Berman would say, the Norris Division. I never understood why back in the day Tampa was in that division. People.
Yeah, they just plugged him in. That's all.
But, yeah, there's a lot of great football being played, and you know who's fallen apart in the last couple of weeks, Pete? Seattle.
Yeah.
A team that you and I both were, pretty impressed with. And then, the wheels came off and they were made to look pretty dumb now 2 weeks in a row, and beaten up pretty bad, with a mini Megatron and all that kind of stuff. They just don't have enough right now. And that's going to be interesting to watch, because I think a lot of people were sort of, I'm sure they have been kicking people out of those pools, Pete, those first to lose pools kind of thing. I think a lot of those folks are licking their wounds about those teams, and probably about the Vikings too, but in the opposite way.
Yeah. Well, the Vikings, John, they lost a big part of their team, not for long, but nonetheless, they lost them, and they played a different second half. They didn't play very well. The Jets had a little bit of an opportunity, and it was open for them, and they didn't take it. But I'll tell you what, Aaron Jones, our running back that we took from Green Bay, who'd been there for multiple years, he's kind of the lifeblood of the team. He's got energy. He's got an unbelievable ability to catch the ball, run with the ball, block if he needs to. and sacrifices. He's been a fun guy to watch, you know, and it's always interesting when you get a guy from either Chicago or Green Bay or Detroit and vice versa, you know, back and forth with all those different teams up there. It doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it's pretty interesting. And this guy, he wanted his Lambeau leap. He didn't get it, but he's been playing really, really well for the Vikings, John.
Yep, he is a good player, and they miss him.
Yeah.
It's pretty surprising, Pete. What did Aaron Rodgers have 2 pick sixes, Pete, in that game?
I know he had
the one.
Van
But the
Ginkel
other
or
one
whatever.
came close.
Yeah. Van Ginkel is unbelievable, John. This is an outside linebacker from Wisconsin that nobody probably thought much of him, but he went to Miami. He lit it up. This guy has, I think, 5 interceptions for touchdowns in his early career already. I mean, he's a guy that we could like to refer to as a baller. I mean, he shows up and he's ready to play. He's got the long blonde hair and the whole deal, but I'll tell you what, the guy's a heck of an outside linebacker. He really is.
Yep. Well, thanks for joining us today, folks. This has been the Rebel's Edge. If you'd like to follow us, he is at Pete Najarian, Najarian, and I'm at John Najarian on Twitter. We appreciate you following it, retweeting the show, and tell you what, we'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.